Today we're covering the case of the St. Louis Jane Doe. And before we dive in, I'd like to warn viewers that this case contains graphic content that may not be suitable for all audiences. I'll display a warning on the screen before anything particularly gruesome is discussed or shown. The St. Louis Jane Doe was found on February 28, 1983 in St. Louis, Missouri. Two men entered an abandoned apartment building to look for scrap metal for their car. In the furnace room of the basement, they discovered the headless body of a young black female beneath a pile of debris. She was naked except for a blood-stained yellow sweater and had been left lying on her stomach. Her remains were not recognizable due to the traumatic injuries she had sustained. She was murdered between 3 to 5 days before her discovery, and her cause of death was strangulation. Also, she was raped, decapitated, and her hands were bound by the wrists behind her back. Authorities concluded that she was not murdered or decapitated where she was discovered, as no traces of blood were found near the body. Her head had been severed cleanly by a large serrated knife, possibly a carving knife, after her death. Graphic content ahead. As if this crime wasn't brutal or callous enough, mold was found growing on her neck. Her head has never been located, preventing dental examination and a facial reconstruction. St. Louis Jane Doe, who has also been nicknamed Hope and the Little Jane Doe, was a black female with a medium to dark complexion. She's estimated to have been between 7 to 12 years old and was prepubescent. In life, she was between 4'10" and 5'6" tall, although she's thought to have been closer to 5'5", which would have been tall for a girl her age. She's estimated to have been between 58 to 70 pounds, however, she could have weighed between 70 to 80 pounds. Investigators were unable to determine her eye or hair color. A feature of note is that the St. Louis Jane Doe showed evidence of spina bifida occulta in her sacrum. Spina bifida is a condition that affects the spine. And although it's asymptomatic in most cases, spina bifida occulta can cause the skin at the site of the lesion to have some additional hair growth, a birthmark, or a dimple in the skin. She was well nourished and there were no signs of previous abuse. Isotope testing conducted in 2013 revealed that the St. Louis County Jane Doe possibly spent most of her childhood in the Midwestern or Mid-Atlantic region of the United States, which includes states such as Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Indiana, and West Virginia. Additional tests showed that she may have also been from Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Arkansas, Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana, Tennessee, or the Carolinas. This, in addition to other evidence, strongly suggests that she was from out of state. Her fingerprints, footprints, and DNA are available. The St. Louis Jane Doe was found wearing a yellow, long-sleeved V-neck sweater with no tags. As mentioned, this is the only article of clothing that she was found wearing. She also had 2 coats of red and purple nail polish on her fingers, although the nail polish also could have been a pink or orange color. She had been bound at the wrists with a red and white nylon rope, and this rope appeared to be the type of rope that's used to moor small boats. The abandoned apartment building that the St. Louis Jane Doe was discovered was located at 5635 Clemens Avenue. The building has since been demolished, but it was in the city's West End Caban neighborhood. And St. Louis's West End has a high crime rate and was actually deemed one of the 13 most dangerous places in St. Louis after dark in 2017. The below events show how desperate detectives were to solve the case of the St. Louis Jane Doe. The St. Louis Jane Doe's yellow sweater and the nylon rope that bound her hands was sent by law enforcement to a psychic in Florida who wanted to touch it to gain information about her murderer, or the murder itself through extrasensory perception. However, these items apparently never arrived, and the psychic said they must have gotten lost in the mail during delivery. Detectives also sought out assistance from a group of psychics who performed a seance. Investigators gave them photos of her fingerprints, and as the psychics passed the photos around, they all came to the same conclusion. The St. Louis Jane Doe's head would be located on a boat in the Gulf of Mexico, and they urged investigators to contact the Coast Guard immediately. This lead was pursued in depth, but it unsurprisingly proved to be a dead end. Investigators decided to exhume the St. Louis Jane Doe's remains in 2013 to gather further forensic information. Her remains, along with many other bodies in the Washington Park Cemetery, had been misplaced due to atrocious record keeping. Her remains were located several months later, though. Investigators believe her killer was a local. The building where her body was dumped wasn't near any major thoroughfares, which a transient likely would have used. The most prevalent theory is that she's presumed to be a victim of Vernon Brown, who's a convicted pedophile that was executed in 2005 for the brutal 1986 murder of 9-year-old Janet Perkins. But there's no proof of this since he refused to talk to homicide detectives prior to his execution. And Brown had lived in the St. Louis area for an undetermined amount of time in the 1980s. I'm going to include contact information for local law enforcement in both the description box and on the screen. If you have any information that can help authorities identify the St. Louis Jane Doe, I urge you to come forward to help her family reclaim her and put her to rest. Thank you for watching.